live, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. Thank you very much for joining me at Talk Live. Today we are back. We're going to have, if I can, 3 shows this week because quite simply I let go with one as of last week. But we are back and we are live here. Thank you very much for joining me at Talk Live. It was a busy week, to be fair. And again, sponsored by Duntalk, DUNTLK.com. Yes, we are back here live and we're talking about the U.S. election. Yes, indeed. And the issues and who you should vote for. Okay, now if you're an uninformed viewer, if you're an uninformed viewer, or more than likely, if you're undecided, if you're an undecided voter, especially in the United States and within the sound of my voice, then and you have yet to decide, we're going to just tell you from which way the wind blows and who you should vote for as your presidential candidate. So thank you very much for joining me on Talk Live on IG and YouTube. Like, subscribe, comment on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Yes, indeed. Tell a friend to tell a friend. We are back again on a special Monday night episode. Probably not Tuesday night. Tuesday night is, again, the election, the U.S. election. So all eyes will be on that, even in most environs around the world, in most countries around the world. The United States election is very pivotal in most Western states, if not the world, quite simply. And it is quite simply, could I say the biggest election in the world right now? Pretty much the one that draws the most eyes, draws the most ire, draws the most controversy. Yes, indeed, the U.S. election is finally upon us after a whole year and a half of campaigning. They usually start, yes, indeed, as of the spring of summer of 2023. That's when they start announcing candidates. That's when they go through this whole rigmarole, all up to tomorrow night, and when people start getting in and getting their votes. So thank you very much for joining me at Talk Live. Let's get into it right away. We're not going to waste any more time. Hope you had a great weekend. Not the greatest of days here in Toronto, but again, this weekend in Southern Ontario, quite simply, fantastic time to be in the city, and I hope you enjoyed it to the fullest. Anyway, so let's get into this, people. Yes, indeed. We're going to go through a whistle-stop tour of the main issues at hand here on this 2020 election. This is what people have been talking about. So again, let us get into it here on Talk Live on IG and YouTube. Like, subscribe, comment on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We're going to do this right now. And we're going to get into, I wanted an impartial view. So with the mainstream media in the United States, you're not really getting a real impartial view, no matter what form of media you get, either the newspapers or television or social media. You're gonna find some sort of slant towards one party or another. So I thought I'd go out of country. I thought I'd go to the founding fathers in the UK and have them just outlay the views quite quickly. And Trump v. Harris on America's biggest election issues compared. Yes, this is one of the biggest elections, one of the most hotly contested elections in years, ladies and gentlemen. And it is. Sorry about that. And it is, it is neck and neck. There is no break. Every state is pretty much hotly contested. It's going to go down to the wire. And I very much think that this vote will not be counted in full for at least a good week. So don't expect, results tomorrow night. It's not going to happen. I think it's going to take a few days, if not a week, to finally get to the bottom of things and to see if things are going to be contested. According to Donald Trump, they say if he loses, they say that he will. So again, let's get into this right now on Talk Live on IG and YouTube, and we'll get into this big debate here on the issues from the UK Channel 4, and I thought that's going to be extremely impartial, and we're going to find out what is at stake here. Let's go.
Like no other.
The best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
I accept your nomination.
Take over, Elijah.
But we're going to cut through the noise.
This is what a Donald Trump
or Kamala Harris presidency
would actually mean for issues.
Let's go here. First stop, economy.
It's all about putting America first. If he's elected, imposing tariffs or taxes on U.S. imports will be a central part of his economic plan. And he's not going to go lightly.
The tariff, you make it so high, so horrible, so obnoxious that they'll come right away.
He's floated plans for blanket tariffs of up to 20% on all imports. to encourage manufacturing on American soil. He claims those tariffs will give him money to further cut the corporate tax rate from 21 to 15%, but only if the company makes its product in America. Some economists say those policies won't be good for the global economy and will also cost US households. And finally, Trump wants to make this happen.
The United States will be the crypto capital of the planet.
He's also promised to fire this guy, the head of the SEC, and a major critic of crypto. So what are Harris's plans? Well,
All right, before we go there, you heard what Donald Trump wants to do about the economy. Quite simply, he's here to raise tariffs, people. He's here to raise tariffs in the for most importing countries to the United States. So a lot of Chinese countries, to China, imports to Europe. Anybody who's not manufacturing primarily in the United States, if you're not manufacturing there, you're going to get hit hard and hit big. So a lot of foreign companies are really holding their breath on what can happen if there is a Trump administration. And that, as they said, is going to will allow for a lower tax on those American companies who manufacture primarily in the United States, to allow for shorter, smaller corporate taxes, which Donald Trump has always campaigned on. He's always one to campaign for the well-to-do, always championing the American economy, very much America first. And so a lot of foreign economies are bricking it. Now, again, a side effect of that, as already stated here, is that goods are going to be becoming more expensive, especially those from China, especially those from the Far East, especially those from Europe. And that's going to make it very, very difficult for those in the middle class to keep up with with inflation and the cost of groceries, quite simply. And so it is something to be fearful of from the Donald Trump campaign. So let's get into what Kamala has to say for the economy.
The first thing to say is while Trump wants to cut corporate tax rates, she wants to increase them to 28%.
We will create what I call an opportunity economy.
That opportunity economy includes things like $25,000 in down payment assistance to first-home buyers, lifting the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, and $1 million loans of up to $20,000 for Black entrepreneurs. After the pandemic, the US economy, under both Trump and Biden, recovered quickly, faster than most other rich nations. Ultimately, Harris is running on a business-as-usual model, making slight tweaks to current policy. Trump, on the other hand, wants to turn that system on its head, because despite good performance, many still don't believe that system is working for them.
All right, so stop there, ladies and gentlemen. So as you can see, Kamala is campaigning for the middle and working classes. She is one to push for a, as you say, opportunity economy. She's looking for higher taxes on the corporate and the luxury class and the richest among us, and allowing for interest-free loans for first home buyers, raising the minimum wage, and really and lower taxes and greater subsidies and policies for those middle and lower classes. So she's really pushing for the middle and working classes, ladies and gentlemen. So again, while Donald Trump is really pushing for another trickle-down economy, Kamala Harris is turning around and, his version of trickle-down economics, that is Donald Trump. Kamala Harris is turning that around and really pushing for, growth from the middle, growth in terms of lower taxes for middle and lower classes, more opportunities, more subsidies for, again, Black and minority entrepreneurs. So really trying to push for middle and lower classes to get ahead. So these are two ways in which the American economies will try to bounce back from this mini recession we're in right here. And it's and as was seen in previous Trump and Biden administrations, both did not have a lengthy recession to deal with during their administrations. So it's a toss up. If you are indeed from the middle class, and I think a vote for Harris would be for you. If you are those who are in the top 15 to 10 to 5 to 1%, definitely a vote for Donald Trump would be for you. So again, it depends on how many, So since there are more of the middle and working classes in the United States, I'm thinking a vote for, Kamala Harris will win in terms of the economy. However, don't be surprised if Donald does make a fist of it in terms of, his promotion of how to get the economy back through his tariffs plans and also lower taxes for the rich and for the corporate classes. All right, so let's get into the next item of things, and that is for foreign policy. Let's go. Thank you very much for joining me at Talk Live on IG and YouTube. Like, subscribe, comment on the road to 1,000 subscribers.
Let's start in the Middle East. Both candidates say they want an end to the war in Gaza, but how they would achieve this remains unclear. So in policy terms, at this stage, not much difference, but there is in language.
We cannot look away in the face of these tragedies.
That said, Harris shows no sign of reducing aid to Israel. Trump is a staunch supporter of Israel. While in office, he made the controversial decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem.
The United States finally and officially recognized Jerusalem as the true capital of Israel.
But both candidates agree the main threat in the region is Iran.
Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, it's very simple.
Iran never achieves the ability to be a nuclear power.
What about Russia's war in Ukraine? Trump claims he would end the conflict in 24 hours, wants to cut funding to Ukraine, and make Europe pay more. That would force Zelensky into an unfavorable peace deal with Russia, which Harris has criticized. She says that's surrendering, not a peace plan, and has previously vowed to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. Let's talk about America's big economic rival, China.
Okay, stop there for a second before we get into to China. As you can see, America has very big interest on two fronts, and that is Israel, and that is in the Ukraine. In terms of Israel, the American stance is pretty much stand pat for both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, in that there will be support for Israel, although in terms of Harris, she will hold the Israelis' feet to the fire a little bit more, where Donald Trump is in full support, full support of Israel and the Jewish community there. So as was seen by him moving his diplomatic center, sorry for lack of a better word, from I believe Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So very, very much in Israel territory. So again, it is very, very much, Donald is very, very much Israel first, where Kamala is a critic of Israel, but not so much, because Lord knows support for Israel is still very, very, very strong. So for my Arab brethren among you, I don't see much change in terms of things there. I think that it's as was seen in Gaza, as was seen in the West Bank, things are not looking good. Watch a man dress. Very nice, Golden Tight. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Golden Tight. Oh, interesting name. Anyways, can't say that too quick. But thank you very much for joining Talk Live, and thank you for your comment, Golden Tight. So again, in terms of Israel, it's pretty much stand pat. Yeah, there's going to be a few critics from the Harris side, but I don't see much change in that department. What is a change is what's happening in the Ukraine. I think with Donald Trump, he is very, very much, who is a friend of, in terms of Donald Trump, he's very much a friend of Russia. So that he is trying to broker a peace agreement with the Ukraine, in which, quite simply, as was mentioned here on Talk Live a few weeks or months ago, Donald Trump is trying to broker. Golden Type, very much. Thank you very much for that. In terms of Donald Trump now, he's trying to end the war in the Ukraine. He's trying to end it, and in so doing, he wants to give the territories that have already been occupied in the Ukraine by Russia to Russia. So anything in the Donbass region, he's trying to give to Russia. Say, okay, these are the advancements you've made. You could take those and lead them which for lack of a better word, all pretty much contain, expat Russians. So this is more of a Russian region of the Ukraine. So again, in terms of the war in Ukraine, he wants to end it and the funding of it and give whatever Russia has won to Russia and have the Ukraine, give up territory and quite simply end the war in the Ukraine. And so, and the funding of the Ukraine war. However, in terms of the Harris administration, she wants to continue it. She wants to continue the war in Ukraine, and quite simply, she is backing the Ukraine, the Ukraine government. Now, again, this is a modern day proxy war. Now, what I say by proxy war is a Cold War fought by in this case, not really two different parties, but the Ukraine is on the side of the U.S. And they are strategically the one of the key areas, one of the key bastions of intelligence in terms of the Cold War for the U.S. So the backing of Ukraine and not giving up Ukraine really does help out the U.S. at the end of the day. However, as was stated by Donald Trump really has a good has a great relationship with Putin, so therefore he is going to try to compromise an agreement so that Russia can indeed take what they've won in the Ukraine and allow for the Ukraine and broker a peace agreement, and that would be that. So again, in terms of who you side for, if you're a Russian, you're pretty much on the side of Donald Trump, listen, nobody's on the side of war, and pretty much everyone's on the side of peace. However, if you're a hardliner, you're asking as a Russian to allow for Donald Trump to allow for this peace agreement, end the war in the Ukraine, and allow for Russia to take the land that they have indeed won from the Ukraine. In terms of Kamala Harris, no, she wants to continue the war in Ukraine till a resolution or until a further peace agreement comes about, but she is not giving up on that war. So again, take your pick on who you should fight for. If I were voting on those who to support, I would support Donald Trump in this issue. I think that Russia being such a superpower, I think Donald's influence in terms of this war, even though it would be sort of a blight on the Ukraine state. It is a path towards peace, and Donald's fighting for it in this way, and he has a good relationship with the Russian president, Mr. Putin, and so he will, for him to end the war would be best for all those concerned. But let's get into China.
Candidates want to reduce reliance on China by boosting domestic production and using tariffs. Trump's approach is more extreme, promising tariffs up to 60% on all goods from China, which some say could cost average US households thousands. And as China ramps up war games near Taiwan, a strategic Western ally, neither candidate has been clear on using force if there was an invasion. Trump's approach to foreign policy can be unpredictable, so for Beijing, a Harris presidency could mean stability, continuing the work of improving US-China relations in recent years.
So stop there for a second. Trump is going hard on China. Very, very hard on China. As you can see, asking for a 60% raise on tariffs against China. And China is China, if I can be frank, has the American Republic by the balls in two ways. Number one, the U.S. debt is pretty much owned by China. So if they decide to call upon that debt, then there can be trouble in future for the U.S. economy. Number two, China imports the United States so much in terms of its goods, that the U.S. has become very, very much dependent on that. So if China had their tariffs raised, then it would make it very difficult for those of the American economy to keep up in terms of inflationary goods and services, ladies and gentlemen. So there's a hard line between that Donald Trump is taking towards China in terms of Kamala. Kamala would like to not put up tariffs against China. She wants to further build relationships with China and basically keep things at a status quo, if not a better level. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is a choice between the two. I would think that in terms of the Chinese agenda, and Chinese outlook, I would think that Kamala would be slightly better for the American public in terms of Chinese tariffs, because he's allowing for better standard of living for the middle class and for the working class, especially with all those tariffs that will be kept low and allow for greater goods to be moved between the two countries. And as for Donald, again, he's trying to pitch for, as was stated in the last segment, he's trying to pitch for his rich cronies. So again, he's very, very much for a hard line on tariffs so that his friends can get rich in the process, and in so doing, maybe hurt those constituencies of his own economy, those being from the middle and for the working classes. So let's move on towards, yes, indeed, reproductive rights, in which, there can only be one winner. Let's go.
The debate in America is shaped by Roe v. Wade, a landmark Supreme Court ruling which has protected a woman's right to abortion. When it was reversed in 2022, 25 million women lost that right, and the political fault lines were set.
Yesterday, the court handed down a victory for the Constitution.
Now we are seeing an intentional restriction of rights. What is that saying about the trajectory and the direction of our country?
Reproductive rights have been at the center of Harris's campaign.
The right of a woman to make decisions about her own body.
She's promising to bring back the protections of Roe v. Wade, which will allow abortions until the time frame when a fetus can survive outside the womb, which is about 22 to 24 weeks of pregnancy. She also wants to preserve access to the abortion drug mifepristone, which Republicans tried to ban last year. What about Trump? Well, he previously boasted about appointing the conservative Supreme Court judges who overthrew Roe v. Wade.
And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that.
But unlike some Republicans, he's not in support of a national abortion ban.
I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban.
Instead, he wants to leave up to the states to decide. The rest of Trump's policies are vague, which some experts say is a deliberate move because he wants to appeal more to female voters.
All right, stop there. In terms of the reproductive rights, in terms of the abortive laws in the United States, ladies and gentlemen, it couldn't be any more polar opposites. In terms of, I think in terms of, let me explain. In terms of the Trump campaign, they had moved the responsibility of the right to abortion not from a national level to a state level. So it's up to the states to decide if indeed they will allow for abortion. Now, again, 20 states, especially those in southern states, Christian states, have outlawed abortion. So that has forced a lot of women to either jump state or to jump state in order to have abortions if they are not allowed in their own state. So it has become quite dire in that sense. So and as been put out by the Harris campaign, a lot of women have died on the watch of women who a lot of women have died on the watch of having abortions and yet not having those reproduction rights to hand, especially those of the working class. Quite simply, it's as it is quite expensive for many to move across state lines in order to have abortions, and even so, allow for those abortions to happen across those state lines. And so it's proved to be a very, very difficult way to go for a lot of women out there. And Kamala Harris wants to eradicate that. Kamala Harris wants, I'm sure she'll want to execute an executive order allowing for abortions throughout the United States. And that's exactly what she will come to do, because she has campaigned on this policy, on this issue big time. This is one of the biggest issues within her campaign, and that she's brought a lot of women around to her side with regards to this. Those who are not of strictly Christian origin, she's asked. A lot of women have supported her on this issue in terms of making overturning Roe v. Wade one more time through an executive order, allowing for national abortions to be had. So yeah, this is a very polarizing issue, to be fair, and it depends on where you stand. If you're a man, you tend to vote, go for Donald. If you're a woman, definitely you tend to go for Kamala Harris. Now, so again, I would see Kamala Harris winning out on this issue, but but don't be surprised, because America's it is the most Christian country in the world, the largest Christian country in the world. So he'll gain a lot of support from the Christian conservative traditional constituency. So again, throughout the United States. So this is a very polarizing view, but I would see Kamala Harris winning out on this right, because more women would want to have an abortion on this issue. So again, something that is very, very polarizing, and indeed something that will go down religious and gender lines. So let's get into immigration. Yes, indeed, another hot button topic. Let's go.
For almost a decade, Trump has taken a hard line on immigration.
You got these people coming, half of them are criminals. We're building the wall, folks. We're building the wall.
And he recently falsely accused Haitian migrants in Ohio of eating cats and dogs.
This is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame.
If elected, he says he'll carry out the largest deportation operation in American history, hiring 10,000 more border officers. He also wants tougher rules, denying citizenship to people born in America to immigrant parents, and clamping down on foreign relatives settling in the country. So what are Harris's policies? Well, she ought to want to deter illegal immigrants from reaching the US.
Do not come. Do not come.
She wants to pass a bipartisan bill that aims at tackling illegal border crossings. It so far failed after Trump and other Republicans opposed it. Harris says they're playing politics.
What we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
As vice president, Harris is being scrutinized for her record over immigration, often accused of U-turning. Unlike Trump, who's long campaigned on hardline policies. With record numbers of people detained at the border, immigration will be a key issue for whoever wins.
Make America great again.
We will win.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is probably the most racial of issues here. And listen, Donald Trump has made no bones about it. He recently had his campaign stop at Madison Square Garden, where he went postal in terms of racial epithets and insults, and quite simply, it was a literal bloodbath. I wouldn't say literal. I would say a figurative bloodbath in terms of how many of his guests, many of his supporters really went postal in terms of the really went postal. I'll answer your question right there and there, right next. In next Golden Tite in a bit. I will discuss that soon enough. That's a great question. Question from Golden Tite. Question, my lord. How come you don't like Kamala? Well, again, it's not as if I don't like Kamala. It's not as if I don't agree with some of her policies. However, there is indeed a few things that a few bones I would like to pick here, as I would like to pick with Donald Trump, as we are talking about immigration. Immigration is one of those issues that has soured my view on Donald Trump. Donald Trump has well, he's got into his KKK bag and literally, went postal on many immigrants and those undocumented workers, including those from Mexico and Central America and from the Middle East. He has made no bones about it. He wants to make America white again, because he sees that his greater constituency will come from white voters. So he wants to keep, in no lack of a better word, even though it's very surreptitiously said, he wants to keep the United States as white as possible. Even though by 2030, I think that white people will be in the minority by that time. But again, he is pushing towards borderline controls and pushing out immigrants who are undocumented, and even the children of those who are undocumented. Yes, he is going as far as making sure that those who are undocumented and their children and their families are ushered out, from the United States. Where Kamala, although her handling of the immigration policy with Joe Biden was really, really bad, actually. And she has been accused of many a few things, of which I am a critic, of housing immigrants in some of the better hotels in New York, to giving them debit cards so they can spend, and also, hello Lana, she waves to Richard, and Richard, how are you, sir? So this is thank you for the compliment on the great topic there. Indeed, Lana. So yeah, it's something that needs to be said, that Kamala has reversed her opinion in terms of the immigration policy. She has gone to a strong border. She doesn't want to let many people over that border nowadays, and she's backtracking on her former view of her former president. Now, she again was called out on her View interview, in which she said she wouldn't change much from Joe Biden's administration, and this was one of Joe Biden's key legislative policies, in which the borderline, the immigration laws and rules were relaxed, and it did not exactly please the American public. So again, Kamala has turned her back on that, and as you said, she's telling immigrants, don't come for now, don't come, as she's been roasted for that policy. So I think in terms of immigration, I think that Donald Trump would be winning on this, since the U.S. electorate is still relatively white, and relatively in support of Donald Trump in terms of stronger borders. And he has been on that platform for years, as from the days of when he first campaigned for U.S. president, and first got into office as U.S. president. He's always asked for stronger borders. He's always asked for the elimination of the deportation of immigrants, and he's used some draconian ways and means in order to do it. And it's been laid out to the public, but he is not turning his back on it now, and he is going full steam ahead once again. So again, Donald holds hegemony on this subject, and again, it is a subject in which I can see him win on. So let us continue on to the final big issue between these two candidates. Thank you very much for joining me on Talk Live. Like and subscribe, comment on the road to 1,000 subscribers.
The divide between Trump and Harris on climate change is perhaps the most stark of any policy this election. For years, Trump has dismissed environmental issues.
No, it's one of the great scams of all time.
In his last term as president, Trump took the US out of the world's most important climate deal, the Paris Agreement, which Biden then rejoined. This time round, while he has said climate is an issue in the election, he wants to increase fossil fuel production and has promised tax breaks for oil companies.
We're going to drill a baby drill.
He also said sea level rise is, quote, not our problem.
The ocean's going to rise in 400 years, 1/8 of an inch. and you'll have more seafront property, right, if that happens.
Trump has also vowed to halt offshore wind on day one, but he is in favour of more nuclear energy. He says he will cut energy prices in half. So how does Harris compare? As vice president under Biden, they negotiated the biggest investment in fighting climate change in US history, the Inflation Reduction Act. And Harris has promised to continue this green legacy by aiming to almost halve emissions by 2030, offer tax breaks for renewable energy, and pledge funds to those hit hardest by the impact. But Harris has recently been criticised for flip-flopping over certain policies. Here's what she said in 2019.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
Here's what she says now.
I will not ban fracking.
She's also dodged questions on controversial oil drilling in Alaska, and critics say her green commitments are wavering. The COP29 climate summit takes place right after the votes are counted. Hundreds of countries will be watching to see just how committed the US will be to fighting climate change.
Stop right there, ladies and gentlemen. So, yeah, things couldn't be more opposite in terms of the issue of climate change. The Trump administration has always been one for, exiting any sort of global climate change agreement. The Trump administration believes that global warming is a lie. The Trump administration wants to take a step back from any sort of emission controls that are issued to them by the United Nations climate change agreement, any sort of United Nations or any sort of world climate change agreements. He is very much in terms for drilling and fracking and status quo in terms of the American economy, in terms of his literal backing of any sort of oil companies. He's always been a backer of oil companies. He's always been a backer of fracking. He's always been a backer of coal. Anything that would push the American economy forward to his view. Now, as was said there, Kamala and Joe Biden, they brought the United States back into many of these climate change agreements. Really pushed for lowering emissions and really pushing for climate change initiatives. So in terms of solar and power, the Democratic Party has always been the party of solar power. That means solar power in terms of lowering emissions, in terms of electric use of energy, and really using clean burning alternatives to the energy crisis. So again, that's where the Democratic and Republican parties are definitely at polar opposites. But as was seen here, that Kamala Harris is wavering in this issue, and she's doing it because she wants to appear on the good side of everyone. She wants to appear good to coal. She wants to appear good to fracking. She wants to appear good to nuclear energy. So she may change those views, but it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen if she will stick to those ideas. However, I've always been a critic of the American environmental policy, but that's the reason why they are been hit with so many hurricanes and floods and natural disasters, quite simply because they have not turned their back on their view of climate change, of which I believe I'm a believer. Sorry about that. Of which I am a believer, and it's it's up to the Americans to really change their views in terms of their views on the environment, because I think global warming is real. I think these sea levels are rising, and things are changing. If the United States aren't adaptable to these changes, then we're in serious trouble in terms of the environment in and of itself, and how we are slow. And every single year, things are getting hotter, and it's up to us to do something about that. So again, that's the issue on climate change. It depends on where you stand out, if you believe in global warming or not. That's always been the case. But that's what the candidates think. So thank you very much to Channel 4 in terms of their views there. You've seen their views on the economy, on foreign policy, on reproductive rights, on immigration, and finally on climate change. Thank you very much for joining me on Talk Live. What do you think? Who do you think comes out on top on many of these topics? Comment down below. I want to hear your views. I want to hear your concerns with regards to this. And if I can answer any questions, I will do so. I have been well versed in these subject matters, viewing many news channels and news programs, and so I have a bit of knowledge. Not to say I'm an expert, but I have a bit of knowledge on these views. So again, I have any questions, comment down below, or I want to hear from you on Talk Live on YouTube and tonight on Instagram. So let's get into a second point in terms of the U.S. election. And let's get into into the Diary of a CEO. If you are not a subscriber to the Diary of a CEO, I don't know what you're doing. I really don't know what you're doing. I think it's a fantastic channel on YouTube. I would subscribe to their. I would recommend highly subscribing to Diary of a CEO. I think their subject matter and their chats are with many great people of the zeitgeist is outstanding. And everybody can learn a little, if not a lot, from some of the guests that he has on his channel. So please subscribe to Diary of a CEO if you can. Join the movement as well. I have done so myself. I think it's a fantastic program. But let's get into this guest here that he's had on 4 separate times, Mr. Scott Galloway. Mr. Scott Galloway is an author, a critic, an economic expert, and one of the great minds of with regards to the U.S. economy, in regards to U.S. zeitgeist, and in regards to the U.S. Pop culture. And if there's one guy to ask about this U.S. election from an impartial view, please listen to Mr. Scott Galloway. So we're going to get a little more in depth with regards to where you should vote in terms of the middle class. If I've already done so already, this is a little more in-depth view as well. So stick with me on this one, and we're going to get into Mr. Galloway. And we're going to first decide, because we haven't really focused on Donald Trump for the most part, and we're going to discuss why indeed Donald Trump has done well with regards to the U.S. To the U.S. presidential election. So let's get into it here on Talk Live. Like, subscribe, comment on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Let's get into this show right now. And thank you very much for joining me. Sponsored by Duntalk, DUNTLK.com.
I said every nation would kill to have our problems.
I was just thinking as you were speaking about this idea of perception versus reality, and then you mentioned algorithms and social media. And as you said that, I thought to myself, do you know what's interesting? Now that algorithms and social media have made our politicians more visible than ever. If you go back 50 years, you only saw them stood at the podium, right, making the speech. Now you see them multiple times a day. If I scroll on Twitter, X, whatever, YouTube, I see Trump doing 10 speeches a day. I get to know him more. And I was wondering, in this digital age, is personality now more important than ever? When I'm not just seeing you at the podium, I'm seeing you for 3 hours on Rogan, then 2 hours later, I'm seeing you in another state, then I'm seeing you on a clip, I'm seeing you at McDonald's. And so the old politicians of the past were very straight.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd see them on the podium, how polished was that speech? Now it's actually, it seems the algorithms are going for lo-fi politicians, and personality seems to be more important than principle.
Yeah, we've definitely replaced politicians who were sort of pragmatists and practitioners who used to go to Congress and legislate and pass laws. We've replaced a lot of them with performers.
Yeah, in the UK as well. We've just had a series of them.
You always got to look at incentives. And the person who raises the most money is almost always reelected. And the incumbent, 92% reelection rate, despite the fact that Congress has an 8% approval. So the incentives are to raise a lot of money. And the easiest way to raise kind of a lot of money is small dollar donations. It's actually easier than trying to get money from a PAC or big money. And the way you do that is you say something fairly incendiary that tickles the censors of your tribe by making the other side look stupid. You say something, Jewish space lasers, or Biden is a war criminal. That ends up on TikTok, and the hard left or the hard right see that and start sending in money. And so you have some of the most famous legislators in U.S. Congress have never passed a bill, but are outstanding at getting on TikTok and raising a lot of money. So it's gone from politicians to performers.
I was just thinking about, have I ever seen a boring politician go viral on TikTok? and I've just never seen it. I've never seen a boring. But even in the case you said, where if you say something incendiary, it's both sides send you viral.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Well, look at Trump. If he says, something crazy that I'm going to protect women whether they want it or not, that goes viral, and then everyone, including on my podcast, we're talking about it instead of having a discussion about inflation. Or if Trump gets into office, his current economic plan shows triple the deficits of the Harris economic plan. That is essentially what we've been unable to do, or the left's been unable to do, is help young people connect the dots. That the deficit under Trump will probably be ultimately the largest tax increase in history on young people. Because I'm not going to be around. We're fine for the next 20 or 30 years probably because of our creditworthiness and our ability to borrow money. But at some point, shit's going to get real, and the Chinese or foreigners are going to stop showing up to buy our treasuries. Interest rates are going to skyrocket. You'd have massive inflation, and at some point, that debt is going to come due, right? So I love that every lie is a debt, and at some point it comes due. But we haven't been able to connect the dots for young people that these deficits will in fact be a tax on young people, because it's a wonky, boring conversation, and we'd rather talk about this outrageous thing he said. So these outrageous things people say take oxygen out of the room around any real discussion around policy. And in the US, I don't know if it's the same way in the UK, but politicians love their jobs, so they gerrymander every district. Every congressional district is very hard red or hard blue. So we send kind of the crazies from the far left and the far right. It's no longer the general election, it's the primaries. So it's a war, it's an election between Republicans or an election between Democrats. So they all try to out conservative or out progressive each other. And we've sent a group of people to Congress who fundamentally have a entirely different worldview than one another. And also it's minority rule. In the US, 20% of our population is 80% of the senators. And the majority of Americans are somewhere in the middle. And that it does not describe their representation. So we have sort of minority rule now.
What is Trump?
Stop there for a second. So, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, as has been said by many, I'm sure you know, the U.S. election is more than any other election in the world a popularity contest, and it's about how much money you raise and also how viral you can get. And again, Donald Trump, more than anyone else, has really pushed the narrative in terms of becoming viral, in terms of saying in terms of saying such things as I'll protect you women whether you like it or not. I'm paraphrasing here, but he's trying to get the zeitgeist to and more views to his way of thinking, and to again win the day in terms of saying the smartest, the sassiest, the more outrageous thing possible. And with that come the support, and it is indeed polar opposite support. So either you are a near right wing Republican, or you are a center to left progressive supporter of the Democratic Party. And as Mr. Galloway has already said, people meet in the middle. But it's to win the hearts and minds of those in the middle. That is the key. That is the key point. So the more viral you can become, the more outrageous you can become while still sticking to policy. That is the main thing in terms of winning this election. And also, as he said, the more money you raise, the better chance of you winning in the election. That is the dirty part of the game. That is the dirty, nasty secret of it all. You have to. Within the last, I would say, 5 to 6 presidential elections, I would say more than that, going back to the 1980s, the one who raises the most money are the ones who, chances are, will win elections. And will win not only elections, but also second term into office. So it is a nasty business. It is a fight that involves money and involves you becoming the most controversial you can be, the most outrageous, outlandish you can be, and the one who can bring more eyes to your presidential election, presidential policy. So it's a dog fight from beginning of the campaign to the end. except in this election more than ever, there hasn't been a standout outside candidate to come to the fore like they did in '08 in terms of Barack Obama. It's pretty much been a closed shop ever since then, and and no different as it is today with regards to this election. But let us continue with this topic with Diary of a CEO and Scott Galloway.
Done well. So if you were objectively analysing his ability to capture votes and to get people to believe and come with him, what would you, if this was a marketing class and you had marketing students in front of you and they were trying to learn from him as to how to market their products in their lives, what would you say to them?
Well, the ultimate business strategy is when everyone's barking up the same tree, when everyone's zigging, you zag. So I'll just, the notion that Amazon was the biggest e-commerce company, the model was you own the consumer data, you build the biggest platform, and then you slowly but surely start increasing your take. And then Shopify comes in and says, your packaging, your data. I mean, the opposite of Amazon. We're not about the customer, we're about you're the customer, you're the client. You want to sell on our platform, you own everything, we're just here to service you. They kind of zag. That's the ultimate business strategy when everyone's going away to go the other. For the last 40 or 50 years, politicians have been very PG-13, trying to appeal to every group, worried about offending everybody. And people over time just felt like, this guy's really slick and makes me feel good, but he or she's lying to me. And then he showed up and started saying these really offensive things that felt raw and felt authentic and really appealed to people. I mean, this guy's unafraid. He's telling it like it is. And he kind of tapped into this sort of grievance and anger that had been bubbling up and started saying these really off-color things. I'm going to ban Muslims from entering the country. And a lot of people, even if they don't believe that, said, well, he's not a politician. He wants to burn it down. And he wants to burn down his own party. So he really tapped into this authentic zeitgeist of zagging while everyone was zigging. He's absolutely the most non-traditional politician. I think in person he is charming. He's done a great job with social media, capturing attention. We're in an attention economy, right? And he every day is in the news cycle, realizing that it's like Umberto Eco, the Italian philosopher, said, the new economy is about being famous. It doesn't even matter what you're famous for. And he's captured that. So he comes across as authentic, unafraid, politically incorrect in a sea of political correctness that kind of infected both sides. He has great political instincts. So he's kind of zagged while everyone was zigging, and people found it refreshing. And even if people don't like him, a lot of people are under the impression that because he's a business person, I think 40% of America goes into the voting booth and just votes on who they think will put more money in their pocket. Full stop. Government's ineffective. I just want them out of my pocket. And I think, correctly or incorrectly, more Americans believe that they'll have more money in their pocket because he's a businessman and will lower taxes. Even if we kick the can down the road in terms of deficit, he's convinced Americans that he's better on the economy than the Democrats.
So there we have a perspective in terms of why Donald Trump is indeed so appealing to certain viewers, because he speaks to a certain he's not afraid to be off color. He's not afraid of saying what's on his mind. He's not afraid of being nasty to certain groups within the United States, especially those of Latin and Middle Eastern descent. He has pulled no punches in terms of that, and in terms of in certain aspects, black voters. He's come in to basically criticize and demonize them, as has been with the Haitian population most recently, especially the dogs and cats reference. So Donald Trump is, he's tapping into a certain voter, mainly white, mainly male, that have this on their mind, that aren't exactly accepting of this melting pot of an American state, of the American dream, of the American experiment, and he's winning with those sort of voters. And so he's really polarized politics, American politics. Either you're with him or against him, and there's no middle ground as it once was previous to Donald Trump. And some people like it that way, and some people don't. I know many in my family who have supported Donald Trump on many an issue, they look aside from his racist views from previous, and have allowed for his views to basically be accepted by them. So that's why I have such trouble. I mean, speaking candidly, that's why I have such trouble with Donald Trump, because he has a racist past, because he has a racist present, and he'll have a racist future. And he will not change how he thinks, no matter what you think. So again, in answer to the previous question here, how come I don't like Kamala? That will come up in due course. But in terms of Donald, I don't like him either myself. He's but as I don't necessarily have to like him to not allow, if I were an American citizen, don't have to like him to allow for him to be a president if he's going to put more money in my pocket, if he's going to help improve the economy, if he's going to help the American people in terms of their day-to-day lives. So a lot of people, especially those of Latin descent, those of African American descent, those of Middle Eastern descent, have decided to put away their opposition to Donald Trump aside, as long as they are living in a prosperous way. So let's get into more of this discussion with Mr. Scott Galloway. And thank you very much for joining me on Talk Talk Live. Like, subscribe, comment on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Let's get this.
Watched him on Joe Rogan the other day.
I saw some of it.
That whole strategy of getting out and doing the podcast circuit, I think this is the first election cycle where I've seen podcasting become so important. And
100%.
that Joe Rogan Trump moment, I think, is a real defining moment in podcasting, but also like political strategy. What did you think of that move?
You're absolutely right, Stephen. So every election brings a new medium to the forefront. Kennedy and TV, FDR and radio, Obama and Google, Trump and Twitter. This will be the election, the podcast election. Because the last time there was a presidential race, since the last presidential race, cable TV is down 22% and podcasts are up 30%. So by going on Joe Rogan, 11 million people, 40 million people have seen that on YouTube. The average cable show gets about 500,000. A primetime cable show gets about 500,000 people. So going on Rogan for Trump is the equivalent, or reaches the same number of people as if he went on MSNBC, CNN, and Fox every night during prime time for an hour, every day for an entire week. He will reach more people going on Rogan. You might get 300,000 or 400,000 going on CNN, maybe, for a 6-minute or 10-minute or 20-minute interview. So this is definitely the election of podcasts. They have become dominant. I would argue the seminal podcast was actually Vice President Harris going on Call Her Daddy, because not only did they not go on this medium, they wouldn't have gone on that type of podcast. But for a week, the entire zeitgeist in the U.S. was talking about that podcast. It wasn't talking about her interview on Face the Nation, or it was talking about her on this podcast. So this is the...
And we've discussed that here on Talk Talk Live, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, I called it. Well, I basically featured that on Talk Talk Live in terms of her interview with Call Her Daddy, in which she didn't give a glowing review of herself, and I think that speaks to the question that was already asked by Golden Tite. She was saying, why do you not like Kamala? Because she goes on some of these ditzy shows, and they're not they're not hard political shows, and she basically, she caters to her base, which is women of a certain millennial women who are asking for abortive rights. So again, I did not exactly like that, because she didn't speak the policy, didn't speak the issues, and it was a snowball. It wasn't a snowball. It was really a puff sort of appearance, quite simply. I mean, it put a lot of eyes on her campaign. Yes, he's absolutely right in doing that. But I think it lowered her view in my eyes because, Call Her Daddy is not exactly as hard hitting a channel as with Joe Rogan. It's not as reputable a channel as it is Joe Rogan. And she never really stepped into the arena with Joe Rogan because she knew that if she did, she would not be, well, I wouldn't say she wouldn't be well received, but I don't think she'd be ready for a set appearance because, again, a lot of hard questions will be to her way. And as will be alluded to here by Scott Galloway, later on in the show, Kamala Harris does not think well on her feet. If she's prepared and she studies for things, she does wonders, as was seen in the first and only U.S. presidential debate in which she ran ringers around Donald. To be fair, she did. She really won that debate, no doubt about that. But again, when asked about certain questions, as she was on The View and certain things, and she's asked to, think on her feet, she's pretty much null and void. So that's the problem that I do have in terms of Kamala Harris and the fact that she did go on Call Her Daddy. To be fair and frank, let's go.
The election of the podcaster.
For me, as an objective marketeer, watching that Rogan interview, I thought that Trump's team did a masterstroke. I thought it was, I thought it was absolutely the perfect thing to do because
100%.
Absolutely humanized Trump in a way, softened him in a way that I hadn't seen before. And funnily enough, I won't name their name, but I know a lady who's a very strong feminist and is very anti-Trump and is very liberal. And she said she watched it, and the next day I said, "What did you think of it?" And she said to me, "I burst out laughing like 10 times. He's so funny."
He's a charming guy.
That's what she said to me.
And he talks.
That's one thing that Donald Trump does bring to modern day is the fact that he is very affable, very funny, and he's very I wouldn't say self-deprecating, but he is because he has his ego is something else. But he really doesn't take himself too seriously, and he really goes with the crowd. And he's not the funniest guy in the world, but he realized certain trends and he sees what people want and he jumps upon that. So he's very, very anticipatory. He's very clairvoyant in that sense, and he realizes what the people want and he gives it to them. And he's very funny in doing that, and his delivery is very. It resonates, even though he's very much one for the upper classes. To be fair, but he very much understands and he can tap into mainstream America, and that's the reason why he has controlled the Republican Party for the last 8 to 10 years. To be fair, let's continue.
It's about when he was on The Apprentice, and it softened him, made him seem more human, which is what he needs. So it's a big mistake. Occasionally I hear from the campaign and they ask for advice, and whenever a campaign calls you and asks for advice.
Which campaign?
Well, the only people who've ever contacted me are on the Harris side. I got contacted by the Trump campaign in the last cycle, but not this one. I think they've figured out who I'm supporting. And whenever, by the way, I want to be clear, when they call you and ask for advice, that's Latin for please send us money. I think they pretend to care what you think. So I don't want to pretend that I'm having any sort of influence. But my one piece of advice to anyone I can talk to who's remotely linked to the Harris campaign is that she get on a plane, go to Austin, and do Rogan.
Why is it in your view that men are? Because Trump.
There you go. So, ladies and gentlemen, her appearing on Call Her Daddy did her no favors. It actually lowered herself in the eyes of the American public because, again, going on Call Her Daddy, yes, it would bring eyes to your platform, bring eyes to your campaign, but at the end of the day, is it a serious podcast? Is it a podcast of high repute? No, it's not. Joe Rogan is. Joe Rogan is pretty much the Cadillac of podcasts. It is the A1 of podcasts. And going on that, that people are going to watch, people are going to view. You're going to get you're going to really throw influence to your campaign, and it will humanize it quite simply because Joe Rogan is one of the better interviewers that there are out there, bar none. And I think indeed it was a masterstroke by the Trump campaign. It humanized Donald Trump. He was the first to jump on said opportunity, and he ran with it, and I think it really pushed his approval ratings further upward because he was lagging behind Kamala at the time in terms of his approval ratings and in terms of the Gallup polls, but after that, they pretty much are running neck and neck from here on in. So, masterstroke to the Trump campaign by getting him on the Joe Rogan podcast. Let's continue.
Assembled this group of interesting individuals to be part of his campaign, from RFK to Elon to Vivek to Tulsi Gabbard now and himself. And this is drawn in, it seems like young men. It seems like a lot of I actually did a poll in my group chat the other day, 3 or 4 days ago. So 6 men in there. And I polled them, I said, who do you want to win the election? And 4 of them said Trump. My position, actually, which I've not really ever shared publicly, is that I see no great option.
Oh, perfect's not on the menu.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That is exactly my option. There is no perfect candidate here. There is no outright candidate. If it were up to me, I wouldn't vote. I literally would not vote in this presidential campaign because there are drawbacks to both of these candidates. Kamala is not as will be explained here. Kamala has not done well in terms of blackmail and male voters, and Donald Trump has had a history of racism that cannot be denied. And I see him as a reprehensible individual, even though he is entertaining. He is still reprehensible. Is that trends of pet eating? Yes, indeed. Lana BK, thank you very much for that. Yes, indeed, there are trends of pet eating, but again, that has been such rumors have been allayed by not only Springfield, Ohio, but many within that district, including Republican politicians within that district. They have denied such claims. So again, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. J.D. Vance is the first one who spread said rumors, and Donald Trump really capitalized on the rumors himself. They should be ashamed of themselves, quite simply, and that's one of the reasons why I do not wish to vote for Donald Trump at the outset. And I wouldn't vote for Kamala Harris in and of myself. I would abstain from voting. And again, I'll let my man continue there as we move forward.
Yeah. So I'm like, and the things that, again, I think a lot about are the wars that are going on around the world. So I ask myself, who will stop the wars? And I think a little...
Let's go back. There we go. I'm sorry about that.
Campaign is that she get on a plane, go to Austin, and do Rogan.
Why is it, in your view, that men are... Because, Trump's assembled this group of interesting individuals to be part of his campaign, from RFK to Elon to Vivek to Tulsi Gabbard now and himself. And this is drawn in, it seems like young men. It seems like a lot of I actually did a poll in my group chat the other day, 3 or 4 days ago. So 6 men in there. And I polled them, I said, who do you want to win the election? And 4 of them said Trump. My position, actually, which I've not really ever shared publicly, is that I see no great option.
Oh, perfect's not on the menu.
Yeah, I see no great option. Yeah. So I'm like, and the things that, again, I think a lot about are the wars that are going on around the world. So I ask myself, who will stop the wars? And I think a little bit about the economy. And then also, from a selfish perspective, think about my ability to build businesses, to get visas in the US, and those kinds of things.
Yep.
And I also think about women's reproductive rights, because I think that's an issue that's quite close to my heart. But why are men choosing Trump?
So this is an unusual election in the sense that neither of these candidates, based on their metrics, has ever been elected before. We've never had it since maybe Roosevelt. Was it Roosevelt or Truman, actually? Have we had a president, an incumbent party, be reelected when they have less than a 50% approval? So if Harris gets elected, it's almost a first-time occurrence that an incumbent administration this unpopular gets reelected. Trump never cracked 50% approval. No presidential candidate who has never been above 50% has ever been reelected. So whoever wins, it's an unprecedented election of someone who typically does not get reelected. In terms of men, what you've seen is young men are going more conservative, young women are going slightly more progressive. And that has a lot of unfortunate ramifications because, again, it's another reason why young people are not getting together and mating. It's yet another reason not to date somebody. When I was your age, I was thinking about this when I was dating. For the life of me, if I went through every person I've dated in my 20s and 30s, I don't remember what their political affiliation was. I didn't care. We didn't talk about that. It was like, you know, are you fun? I'm fun. Are you attracted to me? I'm not, you know, like, let's go out, let's drink, let's see where this goes. We didn't talk about politics. So it's a shame because now politics is now kind of a gender divide. So it's having social ramifications. I would argue that young men are not going to the Republican Party. They're actually less conservative, or people have this image of young men that their knuckles are dragging along the ground. They actually are almost as in favor of gender rights as young women. What I would argue is that they're leaving the Democratic Party because if you go to the DNC, the Democratic Party's website, there's a section that says who we serve. Click on it. And it says, these are the constituents in America that we serve, that we advocate for. And it lists 16 demographic groups, ranging from Asians and Pacific Islanders, the disabled, seniors, Black Americans, veterans. It goes through all of these groups. And I tried to add it up, and I think it adds up to 76% of the US population. But similar to kind of the DEI apparatus on campus now, or on university campuses, when you're purposely advocating and trying to advantage 76% of the population, you're not advantaging 76% of the population or advocating for them. You're discriminating against the 24%. And that 24% are squarely one group. It's young men. And if you look at the Democratic National Convention, it was a parade of demographic groups, but not one mentioned the group that has fallen furthest, fastest in the United States, and that's young men.
Stop right there. Now we're going to get to the question. The question was from Golden Type, my lord, how come you don't like Kamala? And he answered it right there. He answered it right there. Because Kamala Harris does not support men. She does not support men at all. She doesn't support young men in particular. And she considers the black male vote an obligation as a code of conduct, as saying that if you're black, you must vote for me. And she has not really catered to that constituency. She hasn't catered to men, period. Her campaign has always been about minorities and women. That's what this campaign has always been about. As he has already said, it caters to 76% of the population. And if you're talking about black voters, she's catering to black female voters, especially with her, especially with abortive rights, especially with the $25,000 campaign fund, especially with the $25 million for startup black businesses. This is basically catered to black female voters because they're the ones who need the leg up. We have featured that on Talk Live on many an occasion, in that black women are the least married and the most divorced. Black women are lagging behind in terms of, even though they're opening up more businesses, most of those businesses do not tend to succeed. So therefore, she's trying to shore up things in terms of those voters and also for minority voters. And as he's already said, in terms of the DNC convention a couple of months back, it was a role of black female and minority constituencies to which have built her campaign. And she has expected the black male vote. She has expected it. And for young men of a certain age, from 18 to 30, they did not feel included in this campaign. I think they felt excluded in this campaign. That's why you're seeing a lot of black conservatives leave the Democratic Party, because they weren't being spoken to. And not only that, you can see it by, well, we've already gone into this. It's a controversial topic, yes, but her marriage to you-know-who did not exactly please black men to any great effect. They felt that they were being ostracized from the campaign, and they felt left out. They felt literally left out. So again, that's why you're not getting a push towards the black male, a push towards the male vote, especially young male vote, 18 to 30. And they feel them as being expendable. Either you vote for me or not, but they were pushing for the female vote, especially in terms of their right. They're pushing for the immigrant vote. They're pushing towards the minority vote, especially towards certain campaign issues. And that's the long and the short of it. She wasn't pitching to men. She was pitching to women. She was pitching to minorities, but definitely, more importantly, women. Let's continue.
Families and young men feel this, right? We don't have an opioid or a homeless crisis in the United States. We have a male opioid and a male homeless crisis. 3 out of 4 opioid addicts, 3 out of 4 homeless people are men, right? 3 times as likely to kill themselves, 12 times as likely to be incarcerated. Women under the age of 30 are now making more money than men. More single women own homes than single men. And by the way, we should never do anything to get in the way of that. That's a remarkable victory for us. But a lot of young men and their families feel that these young men are really struggling, and they are not seen by the Democratic Party. Because the Democratic Party, I would argue that our big failure over the last 20 years is that we've become sort of these self-appointed cops of social justice, and have tried to lecture the nation on what is the right social policy or behaviors, and that America has pretty squarely rejected this. The example I use is the University of Michigan, an amazing university, has invested $150 million in DEI, social policy, and the number of complaints about racism is up 30-fold. The sentiment, the feeling about America has all gone down. And so the Democrats have decided we're about social policy as opposed to the economic policies that are actually going to impact you. And a large part of America has sort of rejected it. Young men do not feel seen by the Democratic Party. And it's not only just young men, but it's their families. So I would argue it's not so much they're moving to the Republican Party as they're moving away from the Democratic Party. But there's just to use this overused term, young men do not feel seen by the Democratic Party. It's like, you're fighting for everyone except for me. And let's be honest, my group is not doing well. The group that has ascended the fastest globally is women. Twice as many women in the last 30 years elected to some form of parliament. More women globally now are seeking tertiary education than men. By the way, again, a huge victory for all of us. Fantastic. But there's this analogy that Chris Williams, the podcast that kind of reminds me a little bit of you, uses, and he calls it the high heels effect. And that is 50% of women say they won't date someone who's shorter than them. I bet it's more like 80%. It's just an embarrassing thing to say. And it's very instinctual because women at some point are more vulnerable because of pregnancy and raising kids. And they want someone who instinctively they feel could physically protect them. So they tend to be not attracted to a man shorter than them. Metaphorically, women are getting taller and taller each year, making more money, more college attendance. They're just killing it. More and more people elected to positions of power and influence. Men are getting shorter and shorter. So in sum, we've talked about this. Women mate socioeconomically horizontally and up, men horizontally and down. The pool of horizontal and up among men is smaller. And when men don't have the prospect of a romantic relationship, they come off the rails. Women
stop there for a
second.
Okay.
Reinvest that energy in
Yeah, let's stop there for a second before we get into it. Before we get into more of his commentary. Very, very poignant, very, very great stuff there from Scott Galloway. There it is. Women are really prospering in many a field. DEI has really taken hold of many an industry. Men are being ostracized. Men are seen as expendable. Men are seen as expendable, especially in this campaign by Kamala Harris. This, more than any other, has really expended the young male vote, the 1830 male vote. They see them as expendable, quite simply. And hypergamy is at its peak right now in terms of the female vote. Women are in for more bachelor and associate degrees. There's more female attendance in colleges. That's not to say that in terms of masters and in terms of doctorates that usually levels out. But men are seen, and again, it is the high heel effect, where men as women are metaphorically getting taller in terms of in terms of the rule of sticks, in terms of the money that they earn, in terms of the men that they want, in terms of their earnings that they want, in terms of the degrees that they get, in terms of the the influence in work that they have. All these things are trending towards women and not towards men. And men are feeling the effects in terms of women being hypergamous. I've always said that, and it is exactly true. Women will only date to their level and up in terms of protection and provision. And so women will only see men who can protect and provide. And if they are to provide, they need to provide at a level in which, for the most part, women see as a redeemable, at a redeemable level. So therefore, at their level or higher. So therefore, with that in mind, I think this campaign was run on a hypergamous way. Either you can help me as a man get these votes so I can get into office, and if I have to name and shame you, so be it, especially the black male vote. But also, with regards to this campaign, they were not catering to young men at all. And that's what led a lot of men towards Donald Trump, because Donald Trump had indeed instilled traditional values, had tried to appeal to men in certain ways, and he was conservative, as most men are trending. So again, there was more acceptance from the Trump campaign than the Harris campaign, and there you have it, people. It's hypergamy in politics. It's literally hypergamy in politics. Either you can help me to get where I want to go, or you're expendable. You're literally expendable. And that's what's held Kamala back. And that's why this is a neck and neck race, because she does not have that appeal from male voters. This is strictly a female campaign. And to many females, they're voting, if they tend to be conservative, they are voting for Donald Trump. So therefore, you're seeing this neck and neck race right now. And that's why she's pushing towards black male voters. But black male voters don't feel accepted, so they are not voting for her en masse, quite simply, because they have been ostracized and quite simply, in terms of her personal life, they weren't exactly well pleased with that. But we've already discussed that on Talk Live if the reverse were happening for Barack Obama. But anyways, we continue it here, and that is why there's not such an appeal from men, because they weren't catered to in her policies, in her campaign, and in her run towards this election. Let's continue.
Friendships and work. Men reinvest that energy in vaping and video games and porn. I mean, men without the prospect of a romantic relationship. I mean, look at the most violent, unstable places in the world. They all have a preponderance of things, and that is a bunch of men with very little economic or romantic opportunities. And so you have a cohort of not only young men, but families that are upset and angry about this cohort, maybe unfairly expectant around what they should expect from the American economy, but they're not doing well. And they feel seen by the Republican Party and Trump, who are pushing back on many of these social policies, that the snake is eating its own tail, that it's gone so far to the progressive that at the end of the day, it's no longer promoting the rights of non-whites, for example. 60 years ago, 12 black people at Princeton, Harvard, and Yale, that's a problem. 2/3 of Harvard's freshman class now identifies as non-white. And somehow, as a non-white male that's not making as much money, that's more inclined to be an addict or gambling, that owns fewer homes, somehow I'm still the enemy. I'm still I've been told by media that I'm kind of should have collective guilt because of the privilege my dad and my granddad received. So there's I think, justifiable anger and a feeling that the Democratic Party has really moved away from young men.
There we go. So again, to reiterate, it's the Democratic Party has chosen to move away from men. They have moved away from men en masse. Men being white men, and men, and also men being black men as well. They have moved towards minority men. Yes, they have pushed towards them to a certain extent, but their immigration policy doesn't exactly agree with them to such an extent. But also, the push is on towards women. It is plain and simple and to the point. And women being hypergamous, the pool of men who can protect and provide are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and a lot of men are being ostracized, and so that's why you find a lot of men either vaping or playing video games in their basements or starting revolutions throughout the world, quite simply because because the world sees them as expendable. The world will always see men as expendable, and if you cannot protect and provide, then you're no good to society. And that is what we have always been pushing here on Talk Talk Live, is that men need to, they need to be seen, they need to be heard, and they need to be catered to as well, just as much as women. And not only that, but men must do their part, and they must, be the protectors and providers that they need to be, and that includes getting in the gym and getting on that ladder toward being a protector. But however, you can't teach height, so therefore, there's a whole segment of men who are uncatered to, that who are deemed as second class simply because they don't have the look of a protector and provider, and it's quite evident to see, and the world doesn't care about them. And it is sad to see that the suicide rates are very much higher amongst men because they are going through it, and there are not many support programs for those men as well. And it's clear that in this campaign, this U.S. campaign, men aren't being catered to at all. Let's continue.
Because you make the case that you're not necessarily convinced it's entirely young men are choosing the Republican Party versus them being pushed out of the Democratic Party. That's kind of summarizes your thoughts. And the Wall Street Journal did a piece showing that the Republican Party have gained more young men over the last couple of years. In 2016, they had 35% of young men. By 2023, they had 48% of young men. And that's a 13-point increase in just 7 years. And I mean, that's the stat from 2023. So I can't imagine what those numbers look like in 2024 based on this election cycle. It made me think a lot about the DEI narrative and how the Democratic Party could champion women without pushing away young men, because we all want somewhere to belong. Mm-hmm. So if you tell me that I don't belong there, and if I'm guilty of something, then I'm going to go find somewhere. And what is it that the Republican Party have done? Because if that 13% increase towards the Republican Party for young men is true, there's something the Republican Party are saying, which is making me think I belong over there.
Sure.
What is that?
Well, to a certain extent, I mean, the strange thing about this, or one of the strange things about this election, is that a lot of people thought it was going to be a referendum on women's rights, bodily autonomy. I would argue those voters are already decided. If you're fiercely focused on bodily autonomy, you're going for Harris. If it's not a big issue for you, you're probably Trump. Or if you're pro-life, you're definitely Trump. I actually think the election is going to be decided based on who presents a more aspirational, effective vision of masculinity. And what you have on the far right is this vision of masculinity that I would argue is kind of, they would say it's being provocative, aggressive, speaking your mind, strength, right? Toughness. But the far right is basically saying, be a little bit coarse and cruel is how I would describe it. But the far left, their vision of masculinity is be more like a woman. And neither of those seem to be resonating with men. If any of them resonates, it's the right.
Stop right there, and that is such a key and fantastic commentary by Mr. Galloway, and that is that in terms of both campaigns, the Trump campaign is asking for you to be hyper-masculine, while the Harris campaign is asking you to be feminine. And for any male that does not identify with the alphabet gang, that the former policy is going to appeal to you more. Simple as that. They are asking for men not to be so masculine from the Harris campaign. They're asking you to relent. They're asking you to to subdue your manhood, your masculinity, and it doesn't appeal to many men. It doesn't. That's why a lot of men are leaning towards conservative views, and that is the long and the short of it. I think a lot of men who are appealing to the Democratic Party, yes, yes, they are pushing towards they are pushing towards getting men on board and getting men on purpose and on message with regards to in terms of their campaigns. Trump is actually pushing towards men, and that's why a lot of men, African American men, and also white men and most men are pushing towards Donald Trump, because even though they don't exactly believe with his racist rhetoric, to be fair, the fact of the matter is he is advocating for them. He is advocating for a time in which men are important, men are seen, men are heard, and men are tending to vote for him. That's the long and the short of it, because the alternative is a Kamala Harris that only wishes to, gaslight you and browbeat you into voting for her, just because you're either black or you're white or you have a daughter, you have a sister, or someone of the or a female in their lives. And a lot of men are not appealing to that. A lot of men see that as being quite negative and derogatory towards them, and that is why Kamala is lagging in terms of her appeal with male voters, and that's why she's in a dead heat with Donald Trump. Let's continue.
Around young men, around this vision of masculinity, what I would argue is that what we should, or the way to position it, you said that you were passionate about bodily autonomy, is the Democrats have not done a good job of convincing young men that bodily autonomy will affect them, specifically a lack thereof. If you want to be kind of cemented in poverty, have an unwanted child as a man. That's not going to help you economically. The case I've been making to young men when I did an endorsement of Vice President Harris is that I think if you polled a bunch of men under the age of 30 and said, would you rather have more opportunities for sex or less opportunities? I think the majority would say, I'd rather have more opportunities for sex. What is going to happen to random opportunities for sex when, if a woman gets pregnant, she might end up in an emergency room parking lot because the doctors won't treat her? They say she's having a failed pregnancy and she's in sepsis. There are now instances where emergency room doctors are worried about treating her for fear that they're going to be criminally prosecuted. What's going to happen if a young woman gets pregnant and has to carry the baby to term? Do you think she's more inclined to have random sex? So I think what we needed to do and we failed to do on the progressive side is to say the bodily autonomy affects men almost as much as it does young women. And that the economic policies of Harris will also give you, I think about masculinity as being a provider, a protector, and a procreator. Provider. Who's going to give young men the chance to be the better provider? People think it's going to be Trump, that he's a better business person. He did have a strong economy under his administration, not as strong as the Biden administration, but the general view is he would offer a better economy. Which atmosphere am I more likely to be a good provider in? And they've done a better job of articulating that, even though I would argue the evidence is that whether it's Goldman Sachs or any investment bank that's done the math, they've said that the economic growth under the Harris policies would probably be stronger, especially when you take into account that if Trump enacts the tariffs he's talking about, 60% on all Chinese goods, and does anything resembling the war on immigration, legal and illegal, that he's articulated, that's a recipe for inflation. So I think the Republican Party has done a better job of convincing men you're going to have an easier time being a provider under our administration, because look at him, he's a billionaire. We're about cutting taxes. We're about economic growth, drill, baby, drill. When I would argue the data does not reflect that. Protector. This is where I think we really blew it. And that is, and Michelle Obama gave a very powerful speech. I think your first instinct, your operating system as a man should be, your default operating system should be move to protection. Like real men break up fights at bars, they don't start them. Real men protect their country, they don't shitpost it. Real men have a real instinct, a reflex instinct. I felt this way very strongly when I was younger. It was very motivating for me to protect the women in their life, right? you know, I don't know
Stop
if
there
are you
for a
close to your
second.
mother?
And I've always said this with regards to men who I run into the gym. The surest way you can get on the sexual marketplace ladder, on the sexual ladder, on the sexual market that have sexual marketplace value. Indeed, I was mixing the two terms. Is indeed to become a protector. There's no doubt about that. It's much harder to become a provider, especially a very good provider, to which women will see you as being their equals or above, especially those women who are of elite earning potential. But and most women. But in terms, if there's one thing that you can do for yourself is have the look of a protector, and that means getting into the gym. That means exercising. That means being at your best of health and having the look of a protector. I've always said that. That's the one thing that you can indeed control. And that is one thing that women will always regard as being attractive in terms of men, that they look like a protector. I have always been allowed to, well, have a relatively good position in terms of the sexual marketplace, simply because for years I've had a look of a protector. There it is. And to those who have stuck with that trend, who stuck with that ideal and have stayed out of the basements, stopped playing video games and stopped vaping, the world is their oyster, because a lot more men have just decided to chuck it in. They decided to, to give up on the dream of being a husband, of being a father. And part of that dream is given up by you not operating on yourself and not making yourself the best you can be, especially in terms of your looks and physical appearance. And that is, I think, the biggest strike that you can have, because that is within your control. That is with you actually going out there and making the effort to become a protective figure, and one who can break up fights, and one who adheres and garners attention and garners respect. And if you're not doing that, gentlemen, then that is the quickest way to relegating yourself to the outskirts of humanity, and basically taking you off the sexual marketplace ladder. Let's continue.
Not really.
I'm sorry to hear that. I was very close with my mother, and the first time I ever thought I need to get my shit together professionally was when she got sick, and I had this immense.
Oh, and I didn't
feeling
relate
of,
this
like,
back to the Democratic Party. I'm sorry. In terms of protector, as Scott Galloway has said, they missed the boat in terms of relating that, being a strong man as being a protector of women, and protector of women's rights, they being abortive rights, and if abortive rights and contraceptive rights, and because again, with more women, with more states going away from the abortive issue and outlawing abortion, a lot more women have to be more careful about their sexual choices. And that will leave a lot more men, and he's right, and he has a good point to this, more men will be on the outskirts in terms of the sexual marketplace, because women will be even more selective of who they choose. So therefore, if you're a win for abortive rights, a win for men to continue being in the sexual marketplace, because it frees up more women to have sex without impunity. Let's continue.
Failure as a man because I didn't take care of my mom at the level I wanted to. I think that's a really good default setting for a man, to move to protection. You don't need to understand the LGBT community. You don't need to understand trans rights. You don't need to understand the nuances of legal or illegal immigration. But when you see a group being demonized, your default setting should be to protection. I think it comes naturally to men. Men are more inclined on the battlefield to run out and save a comrade and get shot than women. Women are more thoughtful. They're more like, is that a good idea? Wouldn't we be better?
AKA, women are more based on survival. Therefore, they will not risk things if it means their death. Men will go headlong into a war, go headlong into a fight, go headlong into a burning building in order to save people. That's part of the male, the male modus operandi, to be a protector, to be one who will save people from their own deaths, to save people from the world, to control the elements, and to create a world in which is safer for the rest of the population.
Retreating, planning, and then kicking the shit up. They're more thoughtful. They look at the fruit and say, is there pesticides in this? Whereas a guy sees movement in the bushes, grabs his spear, and tries to go kill the thing and bring it back. They're more risk aggressive. And I think this default setting of protection is really powerful for men. And we haven't connected.
And that's why you see most billionaires, if not all billionaires, tend to be men, because they're more risk prone rather than risk averse, which is more women, which is why, okay, we've been there in terms of divorce and in terms of death. That's where women make their money. Let's continue.
And I thought Michelle Obama did an outstanding job trying to make the case that men need to have a default setting around protecting women, and women's rights are under real serious threat in the United States. It is becoming a little bit handmaid's tale. 21 states now restrict, to some extent, abortion. And the most mendacious thing about that is it's not a war on women. It's a war on poor women. Because if you have money and someone, your niece or your daughter, gets pregnant, you'll figure it out. You'll get a medical abortion. You'll have access to misoprostol. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, or can get her on a plane to a city where she can terminate the pregnancy. It's the 15 or 17-year-old black girl who gets pregnant, doesn't have access to resources, single mother, doesn't have money, is embarrassed, and no one knows it until she's 5 months pregnant. That person is really screwed. So I would argue that the second leg of the masculinity stool here around protection is not been made that strongly or as forcefully as it should be around the Democratic policies.
I was trying to think through.
And stop there for a second. That is entirely true. The most vulnerable people to the new abortion law instituted by Donald Trump, President Trump, and also by the Supreme Court of the United States, which is now virtually conservative, is that a lot of the more vulnerable groups of society, those being young, black, and female, cannot afford to go out of state to have abortions. They don't have the money to have abortions, period. So therefore, once the price out, it doesn't affect so much the middle / upper classes, because that's an easy thing to do. Once you make a mistake, you go have an you fly off, have an abortion, come back, you move on with your life. But with those who are on the margins of society, it is a problem. It is a huge problem, and I can see the point of a young lady and those who are victims of rape having an issue with regards to abortive rights. But the pitch should have been made that And I'm sorry, I went off track there. And that is part of the reason why a lot of black women aren't married. They're at least married and most divorced, because of the fact that, their sexual freedoms tend to get them into huge trouble, and they can't afford to reverse said decisions that they've made. And with that come the consequences of being a single mother. And we will talk about that soon enough on Talk Live, because I have new statistics to prove that indeed it is not black men who are the problem, but we'll go into that a little later. But anyways, nonetheless, let's continue with this. But that is a huge problem with regards to the abortive issue, and one that the Democratic Party missed the boat on. That if you put men on the sexual freedom aspect and allowing women to have abortions so that more men can be taken on for sexual purposes, I think that would appeal to men quite simply. And good point made there by Mr. Galloway. Let's continue with this. Thank you very much for joining Talk Live. We'll soon finish up with this in a few minutes. Let's continue.
A young man in the USA who is looking at both candidates and thinking, which one is going to allow me to be the protector the better? Mm-hmm. And again, this is where the economy comes back in, because I think to myself, well, if I'm rich and I can take care of my mother.
100%.
If I'm rich, I can take care of my family. So if I want to be the big, strong protector, then I need to vote Trump because I'm going to get rich.
I think that's their message. And I would argue the data actually says something different. That if you look at the economic policies, the clearest signal we have of what policies would be under Harris would be to look at Biden's policies the last 4 years. As a matter of fact, she made a huge mistake on a big show called The View. They asked her how she would differ, how her policies would be different from Biden. And she says, I can't think of anything. And it's like, well, we didn't want to elect him again. Why would we want to elect you? It was a huge gap. And by the way, she's not good on her feet. I mean, we don't like to say that on the left. She's gotten better. She was outstanding in the debate because you could tell she practiced and had the split screen. She destroyed him during the debate. But on her feet, she's not nearly as good as him. He comes off.
Excellent point there by Mr. Galloway, and a lot of informed voters know this to be true. Kamala's not good on her feet. Even though she's a lawyer, even though she's a very well-versed attorney, district attorney with regards to the state of California, she's not very good on her feet at all. She needs to be prompted. She needs to be prepared. She needs to have her teleprompters in front of her for her to be, to be better in terms of debates, in terms of and in terms of pitching her message. She can't really think on her feet. Case in point, that interview on The View where she literally said, "Oh, I don't think of me." I mean, that's a huge gap that everybody picked up on, and a lot may have seen her as unelectable because, again, if you brought her on because I think that's part of the reason why she did not go on a podcast like Joe Rogan, because if she did, she would be asked said questions. She'll be asked gotcha questions, and I think her campaign advised her not to go on that show and go on a show like Call Her Daddy, because of the fact that I don't think she would be prepared or well versed to handle the questions of a Joe Rogan. I think they gave Kamala very simple, very friendly, places to pitch her message, and like the talk show circuit, like the Saturday Night Live just recently, like a Call Her Daddy on the internet, where she can just be pitched softball questions and she can try to jazz her way towards winning over the public. She did not want to be challenged on different podcasts like Fox News. Fox News, she wasn't exactly great. It wasn't exactly stellar on that. They kept her to a minimum. The only reason why she went on Fox News is to cater to conservative voters. But it was she doesn't do well in opponents' backyards as compared to President Obama, who was he was literally flawless in said parameters. However, they really didn't want her to put her into vulnerable positions, especially on such a podcast like the Joe Rogan podcast. Let's continue.
He says stupid things, but he's likable and funny, and
She thinks too much.
she's just.
You see her trying to mold for the perfect dance, whereas he just goes, blah, 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 blah. I walked
Yeah.
into the room and I told Putin, stop that.
I said way. I mean, you said way to the president of Russia. And also, if you want to see real sexism and misogyny in America, there's just no getting around it. She is graded on an entirely different curve than him. If she had ever been accused of sexual assault, if she'd said half the crazy shit he said, it just would be like everyone's hair on fire. She'd be totally disqualified. Van Jones, who I admire a lot, said, he's lawless, she has to be flawless. I mean, people are parsing her words. And then, he says the strangest, weirdest things that make no sense and seem sort of just ridiculous. So she's graded on an entirely different curve than him. But
to be fair, yes, that's one thing I will say on behalf of Kamala Harris, that she has to be better. She has to be 2 times better as a minority candidate. She's graded on a much different curve, on a much different scale, as he said. And listen, Obama was graded on said curve. He had to be perfect, and he was. He literally was perfect, and that's the reason why he was elected to a second term. Not only he had to be perfect, but his family had to be perfect. Where she is graded on the same sort of scale because she came from a winning team, that being the Biden-Harris team. And, you know, she has a higher degree of difficulty than Donald. Donald has, you know, he is raped, he is pillaged, he has been racist, he has been naughty, he has been, you know, he has buddied up to the wrong people for many a year, and yet that all of those ideas are looked away from simply because he's Donald and he says these outlandish things and he caters to a certain market. So that is indeed a very good point made there by Mr. Galloway on Kamala Harris, that she's graded on a much, much different scale. And she has to be, and I think that's affected her campaign and her approval ratings and her you know, her percentage in the polls. And you know, take it or leave it, that's the way it is. And that's why things are neck and neck, because again, she has a much higher threshold of difficulty than Donald does. To be fair, let's continue.
Her right, they've done a better job. Protect her, I think young men are starting to see that this is getting really serious around bodily autonomy and we're headed in the wrong direction. And then procreation and all these things are tied together. She's offering a first-time homebuyers tax credit, small business loans. Her tax policy would probably be better for young people, worse for older rich people, right? So I would argue that, and also at the end of the day, bodily autonomy, I go back to what I said earlier. Guys, if you're looking to have sex, you got to give women control, domain over their own person.
There's a few things that I thought as you were talking through that then. One of them is, in life generally, you've got to be careful what hill you build yourself. And what I mean by that is, if Kamala Harris has built this hill of perfection and polish, then that's what she's graded on. And it's the same for all of us. I remember having a conversation with my friend who was taking to the internet to talk about environmental issues and stuff like that when I knew he didn't really give a fuck about those things. And I said to him, I said, be very careful, because if that's the brand you build for yourself, that's also the brand you'll be attacked based on, because no one wants a contradiction. So be careful. You might not want to be perfect. I think the best, the sort of most protective position you can take in a world of cancel culture and wokeism is to admit how shit you are at everything, and admit how imperfect you are and how much you don't recycle, because then at least nobody can call you out. And what Donald Trump has built is this hill of like kind of sloppiness off the cuff. So we're so desensitized to it, and we don't actually hold him to the standard of the law anymore.
Yeah.
And so he's almost impossible to attack because it's so consistent.
Well, if you're going to be accused of assault by a woman, the key is to be accused by 28. You don't say one offensive thing. You say offensive things every time you open your mouth.
Rappers are the prime example. No one comes at them for what they say.
No, but if Taylor Swift said something off, I'd be like, whoa, so it's flood the zone, but he seems authentic. And I also think that this is a lesson for the Democratic Party, I think, to get out of identity politics. I don't think we should have that page identifying policies based on your race, your sexual orientation, your gender. I think the sun has passed midday on that.
On DEI, the whole DEI thing.
I would argue that affirmative action is a wonderful thing, and it made sense for it to be race-based back in 1960.
What is that? Sorry?
Well, DEI, or affirmative action. So essentially in America, we've decided to advantage certain people from a very young age. We give them money, we give them preference getting into college. We're told we hire them based on their gender, their sexual orientation, the color of their skin. So we advantage some people, which there's just no getting around it, disadvantages others. So the question is, most people agree, Democrats and Republicans, that some people have had so many headwinds in their face, they deserve a hand up. The question is, how do you identify, and what's the metric for qualifying for a hand up? And traditionally, it's based on the DEI apparatus built on campus has been based on identity politics. Are you gay? Are you non-white? Right?
Okay, we're going to move away from that, and we're going to get towards the end of things, and a few of the brass tacks in terms of age, in terms of what happens in terms of the U.S. election. And so let's get into that right now, the last few minutes, and we'll start here in terms of does age matter in this election, and really get down to brass tacks and really tighten down on the issues here.
To be doing this.
Do you think age matters in this election? Trump's age, he's going to be 80-something years old? But,
Well, he'll be if he's elected, he'll be older than when Biden was elected. The difference is he presents as more robust, and we don't like to admit this as Democrats. He presents as more robust than Biden. I mean, you remember when Biden made the trash comment? He popped up out of nowhere. I'm like, oh, Biden's still around. It felt to me like a video of someone about to go into hospice saying how much they love their great-great-grandchildren.
he stuttered over the previous two sentences. They managed to get the words out, and I said, oh, gosh.
Man, his voice is weak. He feels like it's past his expiration date. And on the Democratic Party, we're so politically correct, we thought we were being ageist. And if Harris loses, I don't think it's going to reflect well on Biden. Biden did not want to drop out. We have this myth that he dropped out. No, he was booted out. Nancy Pelosi walked up, Speaker Pelosi, and said, if you don't drop out, she saw the down ballot was going to be terrible with him at the top of the ticket. Every day for the next 10 days, I'm going to have more and more people come out against you in your party. He did not want to. They haven't spoken since that conversation.
Really?
So the notion that they haven't spoken.
How do you know?
She'll admit it. She said publicly they haven't had a conversation since that conversation. I mean, the notion that all of a sudden he woke up, whatever it was, 9 weeks before the election and decided it'd be best for America if I dropped out. No, these people are narcissists. The same way Ruth Bader Ginsburg, her narcissism ended up hugely. No one believes they're actually going to die, right? I mean, you didn't see Senator Feinstein? It was a ghoulish. It was the land of the walking dead. And she couldn't show up for a hearing. By virtue of you running for office, to put up with all of that bullshit, you have to get tremendous gratification from ego-driven industries. You have to be, I think it's almost impossible not to be a narcissist. Biden's narcissism may cost us the election because the reality is this would have been a much better candidate had there been a competition, not a coronation. We are great at producing qualified candidates who have to go through. If you talk to anyone who's going on a mission in the military and they get to pick their crew, the first question is very simple. Have they ever seen combat? Have they ever been on a mission that involved combat? That's the first consideration. There's just nothing that gets you ready for combat like combat. And the primary process is combat. The debates, the media scrutiny, you get good, you get battle tested, or you get swept off the deck immediately. Here are some of the people who are leading in the polls. You know who Herman Cain is?
Oh, is he the black?
Yeah, the black. He was leading the Republican. Rudy Giuliani was leading. Do you remember who Fred Thompson was?
No, I don't
The star of L.A. Law. He was number one in the polls. As soon as the campaigns and the primaries started, they got swept off the decks. Now, Vice President Harris may have well been the candidate that won, but I think she would have been more battle tested if she'd been forced to do a series of debates, or we would have ended up with a Newsom or a Whitner. I think we did ourselves a disservice, or specifically Biden and the Democratic Party, who thought that ageism got the memo about biology got the memo about ageism and being politically correct. It is insane that we allowed that to happen, to go on as long as it did. He should have been forced out of the race well before he was. I think there'll be a lot of second guessing if she doesn't win. I think a lot of it is going to land on his shoulders and the people around him in the Democratic Party who went into this consensual hallucination that we were being ageist. Well, you know who else is ageist? Biology. And biology's attitude was hold my beer. Look at this guy.
You said on the Pivot podcast.
Stop there for a second. Yes, indeed. I just wanted to run that a little bit further than have an extended view from him on that. And he's absolutely right. I think, Joe Biden was done dirty. He was. But again, it was, and again, the Democratic Party did him a disservice. They removed the rug from under him, and it was basically a coronation for Kamala Harris to become the presidential candidate here. There was no primary run here in terms of the presidential election. This is the first time, and that's why I say there hasn't been a true primary from the Democratic Party since I would say for the last 16 years, basically 15, 16 years, when Barack Obama et al. ran for the office of President of the United States. And even Joe Biden was part of that presidential campaign, that presidential primary. And it's it was evident for all to see that Joe Biden would not be the true candidate, and he should have been taken out of his misery months ago. And again, a presidential primary should have been at the forefront of the Democratic campaign, but we are where we are, and I think it would have made Kamala Harris a little more battle tested. I think she would have been able to think on her feet that much better, and she would have been able to handle a lot of these, these questions that are thrown at her that she can little handle, as she found out in The View, a bit better. She would have gone on a Joe Rogan podcast and been able to think a little more clearly and think a bit better on her feet by doing so, because the presidential primary campaign is ruthless. It is a blood sport, and you have to be the best of the best to succeed. And I don't think the Democratic Party have had such a run towards said presidency in years, because again, Joe Biden was pretty much a coronation. There wasn't too much to decide there, and then Kamala Harris was another coronation. So, I'd be excited to see new fresh blood if indeed Kamala does not make it through this presidential sequence on the Democratic side. But again, it's something to be thought about. So let's just finish up things here, and we can have some closing thoughts.
That there's a 1 in 3 chance that Trump dies in office just based on his age and BMI.
If I was an insurance agent and he wanted $300,000 in insurance, life insurance, and I didn't need profits or anything, I would charge him $100,000, because just based on his body mass index and his age, there's a 1 in 3 chance he leaves feet first from the White House.
2 last things. Trump and Elon Musk, what do you make of that partnership? Do you think that's been a net positive for the Republicans?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you see that booster rocket barreling towards gravity like sucking it back down, and then it ignites, and somehow this shit straightens out, and it veers and navigates into these giant metal chopsticks, you're just like, fucking A, man. I want a Tesla. I want to go on Twitter. I want to whoever that guy's voting for, I'm voting for. I mean, that stuff is impressive. He's also got a very big platform to weaponize. He's basically said, I don't care if it's illegal. I'm going to run these contests, $1 million a day to registrants. I think he's probably the most aspirational figure among young men globally. I mean, he's building cars, rockets, and has
brain chips.
It's like he's every 8-year-old boy's dream. Yeah, I mean, he's impossible not to admire on a lot of levels.
Yes, indeed. The one thing that Donald Trump had, the feather in his cap, the one celebrity that he has in his back pocket that is very, very influential is indeed Elon Musk. Elon Musk is, I think, the man's man, even though he's a nerdy man, to be fair. But indeed, he is the man's man in terms of him being a multimillionaire, being a playboy, having so many kids that he can. Then he could deal with having a compound of his own where he wishes to keep all of his children. He is and he is completely successful, and he caters to that young male mind that will endear himself to a Donald Trump. And having him on his side it was indeed a masterstroke by Donald Trump. In terms of his campaign, getting a guy like Elon Musk on his role. Now, as will be explained here, Elon Musk could have fallen to the Democrats. He could have been he was once a Democrat campaign sponsor and supporter. However, they lost him. And you'll see in a minute why. Thank you very much for joining us on Talk Live. We're soon seating up here, guys. Thank you very much.
Very good for Trump.
Like, subscribe, comment.
Into this manosphere.
We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers.
Economic growth. The guy is, there's no doubt about it, a genius and a risk taker, and has balls the size of Saturn to do the shit he's done. So huge, huge advantage. One of Biden's biggest mistakes politically was he had an EV summit, and he didn't invite Musk. So let's have the woman who invented the Pontiac Leaf there, but we're not going to have Tesla there? That was so stupid. And I hold grudges for much less than that. And Elon used to be kind of he voted for Obama. I wouldn't describe him as a hardcore conservative, but
He said he queued for hours and hours to shake Obama's hand.
yeah. So we/Biden blew it. And also, the really dangerous thing about an autocracy is that it's really effective, and that is the following. If you do the algebra, if I'm a VC that's bet big on crypto, and I say, and Trump says to me, raise me $1 billion and I'll have the Fed announce that they're putting $10 billion into crypto, into Bitcoin. I wouldn't be surprised if this conversation has happened. Hey, Mark Andreessen, I know you have huge investments in Bitcoin and crypto and the blockchain. I'm going to take Bitcoin to $1 million a coin, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I need you to raise me $1 billion. I bet that something along that conversation has happened. A former attorney general and someone who's went to law school, I don't think she's had that conversation with anyone, or at least it's a lot more opaque. In addition, the algebra is the following. If I support Trump and he loses, there's really almost zero chance. I might not get an ambassadorship to France, but there's zero chance Vice President Harris is going to weaponize the DOJ and come after me. He has threatened people and companies with the full power and heft of government agencies if they're not supportive of him. So I support him, and he loses, I'm still fine, and I'm money good if he wins. I support her, and he wins, I don't know. I talked to a very famous host of a morning show that's this iconic journalist who's been very anti-Trump. He's thinking about moving to London if he wins. Not one of these, oh, I'm out of here, I hate America. He's physically worried that he might be, that he will need to go offline for a while because he doesn't want to get in the crosshairs of the DOJ or organization weaponized. Jamie Dimon, smart guy, great leader. I just don't believe Jamie Dimon in any way supports Trump, but occasionally throws out a nice thing about him because he wants to be Treasury Secretary and he doesn't want Trump coming after JP Morgan. By the way, JP Morgan is worth more than the 10 biggest banks in Europe, just to give you a sense of how well the American economy is doing. So the upside, the math is the following. I have less downside if I support Trump than if I support Harris.
Stop there for a second. He's right. Donald. I was just watching this for a second. I was just saying this. Donald is a man who holds grudges. There's no doubt about it. He's a very proud, very egotistical, very maniacal, very, very vindictive man. And if you cross his path, he will stop at nothing to get back at you. And he has his list of enemies, and he has his list of friends. And he is going to check that list left and right if he does get into office. That is a guarantee. He has always said that. He will make sure that he hits that hit list. Donald does not mince words. He does not like certain people because they've come out against him and have been critics of him and have tried to make him look like a fool. He is not about that life. I kid you not. Write it in stone. If Donald Trump ever comes to the U.S. presidency, he will make sure he checks all those people who spoke against him during those legal actions against him and those convictions against him. He will speak out on those who made him look a fool in like the Stephen Colberts of the world. He has gone on record to say that he and Stephen Colbert will have it out. He will make sure that he will go after certain people if he is put back into office again. He has already said that. Any of his critics, any of his detractors, he does not like them. He will go after them. And that is the one, especially if you come off with Kamala Harris, or especially if you made him to look like a fool. Make that, he will not let bygones be bygones. He is very, very egotistical. He's very, very maniacal, and he holds big time grudges. Big time. And heaven helps those who have crossed his path especially during this presidential campaign. Let's follow up with this and finish up here.
What happens to America if Trump wins, do you think?
Well,
Are you scared of that America?
no, not as much as people are. I think the catastrophizing on both sides is ridiculous. Not ridiculous. I just don't think it's warranted. It doesn't recognize history. America is so strong economically. I think America is such an incredible experiment. People still want to go there. The human capital inflows are still unbelievable. The risk taking, the institutions. I think America is stronger than any individual candidate. And I think we have survived worse than him or her. Both sides claim it's the end of America if he or she gets in. The catastrophizing from both sides, I don't think recognizes history nor appreciates. America has endured much worse than him or her. So I don't think America goes away or anything like that. There are certain groups that will be hurt. I do believe women who want to have bodily autonomy, if he gets another 1 or 2 appointments on the Supreme Court, we could see pretty onerous abortion laws across not 21, but maybe 41, maybe even a federal ban. I mean, it could get pretty ugly for women who believe that bodily autonomy is important. I think it's ugly for young people to rack up these deficits. Essentially, a deficit is a tax on young people paid in 10 or 20 years. Deficits don't matter. Deficits are really good for me because I get the champagne and cocaine of short-term stimulus. We're spending $7 trillion a year on $5 trillion in receipts. That's great for me. My stocks go up. The price of my homes go up. By the time shit gets real and shinies don't show up for a treasury auction, I'm probably, I don't know, sitting in Aspen waiting for the ass cancer. I mean, I'm literally going to be 70 or 80 by the time that happens. People your age, by the time you come into your prime income earning years, if you're in America, you might see mortgage rates at 22%. You might see runaway inflation. These deficits are totally out of control. So I think young people, long-term economically, I think women in terms of bodily autonomy short-term are big losers. Corporations probably win in the short term with Trump because he's talking about doing away with all taxes. I pay American taxes right now. He's talking about doing away with taxes for guys like me that live abroad, that I won't have to pay taxes. I'm like, all right, brother, let's rock on, let's roll. But young people in America who are going to have to deal with a debt to GDP that might be 200 or 300%, which usually doesn't end well. So I think certain groups won't do well. But the notion that America's going to go away or all of a sudden, I think we probably have less authority on a global stage. I think it's very hard for us to wave our finger at anyone. I think we'll lack moral authority with someone like Trump in office. But at the same time, a lot of policy experts say nations might be more afraid to take actions against America because he's unpredictable. He's not measured in any way.
So do you think he's more likely to end the wars? Because I have to be honest.
Okay, before we enter that subject, let me just say this before that last subject is discussed. Yes, indeed. Donald Trump, in terms of his economic policies, are indeed kicking the can down the road, and indeed going to raise the level of the debt and the Treasury auction. The Treasury auction in terms of being and the American dollar being the base currency for the world, and it's all going to come due. You're going to involve inflation involving 300%, rising interest rates. All these things are problems for future generations if indeed Donald Trump comes to pass, because again, he's going to pass on a lot of his stimulus to his rich friends, including those domestic and international, who adhere to who are of the top 15%, top 10%, top 5%, top 1%, and the corporate successes that are there in the United States in terms of lower corporate taxes, and that will allow for those for a short-term boom, but long-term pain, because again, it just only increases the trillions of dollars in debt to the United States, and which they have to pay back, and in which they will pay dearly for. Not only that, but also for women, as is already stated. in terms of abortion, in terms of rights, abortion rights, states who wish to disqualify abortion could increase from 20 to 30 to 42, all to a national moratorium on abortion, and that could be seriously, not only seriously. Seriously problematically in terms of women, but not only women but men as well in terms of getting in the sexual marketplace, because women will have to be much more decisive, much more critical in their thinking of who they wish to lie down with, more than ever before. So it will be much more conservative nation, but yet a nation that will incur more debt, simply so that the rich can be as rich as possible, if not richer. Let's continue with this. And we'll finish up here.
This is one where I go, I think Trump calling up a Putin is more likely to end the war than Kamala Harris or the Democrats calling up Putin, because they're on a similar wavelength of I don't even know what the word is, but I feel like there's a higher probability. I'm not saying it will be a good deal for the Ukraine, but I think the missiles will stop firing. So from Putin's end, if Trump is in power.
I understand that math. The way I do the math is similar, but it's when that call happens and what position of leverage we're in to force Putin to strike a deal that maintains as much dignity as possible in land for Ukraine. And I think that call is best placed when it's fairly clear the West is willing to go much deeper and much longer. I think the Russians respond to one thing: leverage and power. And I do think the Europeans are actually ready to step up if America steps back. I think we get, quote unquote, a better deal if that call is, yeah, I've just allocated another 60, 70 billion. We're ready to do this. Europe's stepping up. This is going to continue to be a meat grinder for you. Or we can do a deal. I think that's the call you want. Whereas I think Putin gets on the phone with Trump day one and thinks, I have a lot of leverage here. This guy wants out. He's going to pull funding. So I think the call happens either way. I don't think it happens as quickly in a Democratic administration, but I think we have more leverage. Also, I'm a bit of I don't want to call myself a war hawk, but if you talk about the Middle East, I think there's such a thing as a bad peace. We need to end the war. People are dying unnecessarily. Let's cut a deal now. That was the advice that many members of parliament and Churchill's war cabinet gave to him in 1939. There is a bad peace. And I think that, I've said this and I've gotten a lot of shit for it. I think Israel is doing our dirty work. In the U.S., Israel in 6 weeks eliminated more terrorists on the U.S. most wanted list than we had in the last 20 years. I think there's a greater likelihood of peace now with the defenestration and elimination of Hamas, a weakening of Hezbollah, and the taking out of a lot of these terrorist leaders. I think Middle East peace is more sustainable because Israel's gone on the offensive in this war. And I think in America, we have such a knee-jerk reaction to peace is always the answer because we've never really been attacked. You could say 9/11, but we've recognized so many blessings and so much prosperity. I think that our go-to is always peace. There is a bad peace. And I would argue that I'd like to see, we all want peace in the Middle East, but the question is, how do we get to a sustained peace? And sometimes I think there is a good war. So I'm more on the side, I think, than many people on Israel's offensive actions. I think what they did in Lebanon, taking out the Hezbollah combatants, was the most precise anti-terrorist action in history. I think it was just incredible. And then I see real hope here. I think after the war is over, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, I think, will normalize relations. But I would argue all the death and destruction and the horror on both sides, I don't want to say it's never worth it for the people who incur that type of destruction. I actually am hopeful. I think there's going to be a more sustainable peace in the Middle East because I think there's going to be a winner here. And I think the winner is Israel. And I think a lot of nations in the Gulf want to normalize relationships with Israel. And I think the Kingdom of Saudi America, I'm getting really off topic here, and Israel normalize relations, that's going to create an iron dome that is more effective than their existing iron dome. So I'm actually quite hopeful that this war will result in a more sustainable peace, and I'm not sure that peace is always the answer, as most Americans feel it is.
I think everyone's hoping for peace.
I think we're going to leave it right there, ladies and gentlemen. Well said by Mr. Galloway. As he said, in terms of Ukraine, in one sense, you can take on Russia with a powerful stance. In terms of you being united front, being Europe and the United States against Russia, I think Russia will back down in that instance. Or you can go along with Trump's plan of allowing for the Ukraine to give up certain areas in the Donbass to the Russian population, which is ethnically Russian to begin with, and allow for to shut down the war with Putin, with friendly relations with Russia. So again, you can go either way, and I think that speaks for the former Democrat and latter Republican side in terms of Israel. Yes, indeed. I think Israel is proving with the support of the United States, will indeed be a victor. Will be the eventual victor in the Middle East region. I think their apparatus, their war apparatus, is way more sophisticated and way more vast than those of our Palestinian brothers out there, and it is up to the American Republic to either put a stop to this or by tendering, allowing Israel to tender peace relations with Saudi Arabia. And I think with that sort of summit between Israel and Saudi Arabia, I think there will be peace in the Middle East over time, with an understanding and agreement between with Israel and Saudi Arabia, disallowing Iran, Syria, Sudan, Iran, Syria, Iraq, and any Lebanon and any other such nations to keep their war with the Israel Republic alive. Well, let us get back to our final thoughts here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me on Talk live on IG and YouTube. We're going to go back to the full cam. So let's end it here. Let's put a cap on this. It's been a long show, yes, but it is a very necessary show if you are into American politics. If you are going to vote for Trump, you're going to vote for such things as the economy, as immigration, as abortive rights, and you'll tend to be, I think, male. I think relatively successful in terms of income earnings, so middle to upper class. You'll tend to be of the corporate vein, and you'll tend to like conservative views and tend to be a bit more Christian than others. And I think if you are voting for Kamala, you'll tend to be a woman, you'll tend to be a minority, and you'll tend to push for policies that push for the middle class and for the working class to get a leg up in terms of a more sustainable life. Now, in terms of who you should vote for who advocate for you more. But I think the key constituency, the key demographic of all these people are white women. I think they're going to hold sway. I think that men, including black men, have already given their mandate. And even though they'll vote for Kamala, I think enough of them will not vote for Kamala Harris to a point where it's affecting her in the polls. I think white women will hold sway in this vote. If they tend to vote for their husbands, their conservative husbands, I think that Donald Trump will win. And I think that if they are sincere about seeing abortive rights and abortive right as being key and important topics, I think that they will vote indeed for Kamala Harris. And yeah, indeed. I think the economy, in terms of foreign policy, I think these are all. But in terms of reproductive rights, that is definitely a female vote. So you'll tend to be of the likelihood to be a voter for Kamala Harris if you are coming out strongly for abortive rights across the board in terms of the demographic as a woman. So if you're going to be, if you, I think. If you're a minority woman, you tend to vote for Kamala Harris. But if you're a white woman, that's where things will be decided. White women will decide who will eventually win this presidential campaign, and that is either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. And they will hold sway with things, and I think abortion will be the key issue, especially in definite swing states, and it will hold sway in terms of hegemony as to who will win this presidential campaign, because everything is on a razor's edge. It is going down to the wire, quite simply. It's going to be one of the closest presidential campaigns in history, and it has to be watched. And I don't think things are going to end at the end of the day. They're not going to end tomorrow. There won't be a winner declared tomorrow. I think you'll hear that as we go on later in the week. So thank you very much for joining me on Talk Live on IG and YouTube. This is a long, extended special. I think I may come back with a presidential recap on Wednesday night, but there will be no show tomorrow. There will be no show tomorrow because Lord knows I want my Canadian expats, my international expats, and my American people to get out there and vote with your head and your heart, and we'll see who will be president in the next days and weeks ahead. Thank you very much for joining me on Talk Live on IG and YouTube. We're going to end the show right now, and I'm going to grab something to eat because I'm getting a little bit of head loss, but I thank you very much for joining me. And if you're here for the continued show, like, subscribe, comment on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Yes, please comment below as to your views as to who will win this presidential election and how you feel about this presidential campaign, and what demographic you are with, and who exactly speaks for you. I thank you very much for joining me here on Instagram, and I'll say good night from Toronto. And I thank you very much for joining me here on YouTube, and we will say good night, and we'll be back Wednesday night either with a presidential recap or with a new show, because there has been a lot popping off, but this is the top of mind in terms of issues and